Hello everybody, this is Tip Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are looking at all of the spoilers that have come out today being January 19th for Kaldheim. So we are slowly approaching, or I guess quickly approaching, the end of Kaldheim spoilers, but I'm going to be talking about all of the uncommons, rares, mythics, and any notable commons. And I'm going to talk about what I think about the cards, whether I think they'll be viable, and I'm going to basically just give you a preview of the cards. So let's jump right into this. Starting off, we have Rune of Sustenance. It's a 2-cost white enchantment or a rune, and it says enchant permanent. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it has lifelink. As long as enchanted permanent is an equipment, it has equipped creature has lifelink. So yeah, these are how runes work. When they enter the battlefield, you draw a card, and then they can either directly enchant a creature and they give it a keyword, or you can enchant a permanent, and that being an equipment, and then anything equipped by the permanent actually gets that effect as well. So the technically better thing to do is to enchant a piece of equipment. Why? Or at least not always, but most of the time, it is because, if the creature that it's attached to dies, the enchantment is still going to be on the equipment. And so it's easier to move around. But if you're a deck that doesn't really care about that, you can just put it directly on a creature, or if you're not drawing any equipment. So it's a very versatile spell, and there are some cards that care about runes. Speaking of, we had I lied. There's one in between, but this one is a 3-cost white creature Pegasus 2/2 with flying, and it says artifact and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So yeah, this essentially is an interesting card in my opinion because it really fits well with runes, because runes are encouraging you to play both equipment and enchantments, and so this spell is something that does something a little bit more unique where it's targeting both artifacts and enchantments, and it is actually at common, so it's a very powerful card for such a low rarity. Next, we have Runeforge Champion, which is the card I alluded to earlier. It's a 3-cost white creature dwarf warrior 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library or graveyard for a rune card and put it into your hand and then shuffle your library. And then you can pay 1 mana, 1 generic, rather than pay the mana cost for rune spells you cast. Now, this one feels a little weird. This one was leaked a little while ago before we knew what runes were, but it's a little weird that it doesn't just reduce the cost by 1 and then require you to have each color in order to cast runes. It actually just gets rid of the cost, because it feels very risky to put in something that's not in your colors and hoping to get this card to cheat it out. So you might as well have just made it 1 less, but I guess this is technically better. It just limits what they can do in the future with runes, which I think is a little disappointing. So I would have preferred this said pay 1 less. But yeah, very powerful card if you're running runes, but I don't really see an all runes deck really working. I could see it being you're in an equipment deck, you like that the white rune gives lifelink, because that's really good. So then you run it as well, and then maybe you run this card, but probably not. The advantage to this, obviously, is that if you're running like an enchantment deck, this is both a creature and an enchantment in a sense, because you're going and getting a rune, which sometimes that is an issue with like aura decks, is that you either draw all your auras or all your creatures, and so this kind of helps you balance that a little bit. Next, we have Resplendent Marshal. It's another card that was leaked, but it's a 3-cost white creature angel warrior 3/3 with flying. And when it enters the battlefield or dies, you may exile another creature card from your graveyard. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that shares a creature type with the exiled card. So back when this was leaked, we didn't know about the tribal heaviness of Kaldheim. But now we know about the shapeshifters, we know about the 10 different creature types that are supported, and so this makes a lot of sense for a limited environment. But what's weird about this card is that it's a mythic, so this card is going to care about tribals. If angels or warriors are a meta thing, this will probably be in it. I could definitely see maybe a cheaper warrior mono white deck that maybe wants to run this. I mean, it is a 3/3 for 3 with flying, so that's not awful on its own, and then you add the fact that it can do other nonsensical things. I guess it could see play, but to me, it's not an exciting mythic, and it's not one that I'm like, ooh, yes, I hope I draw that, or at least not draw it, but I hope I pull it from a pack. It's not something that really makes me go like that. I think it would have been better a little bit lower rarity, because I think it maybe a little bit higher mana cost could have been an interesting card in a draft, where you are kind of more forced into those tribal themes. Next, we have Icebreaker Kraken. It's a 12 cost, but not really blue. Snow creature Kraken, 8/8, and it costs 1 less to cast for each snow land you control. So Assuming you're like in mono blue and you're running all snow lands, this is actually a 6 drop. Why? Because you're going to pay 6 mana with 6 lands, but those are going to be snow lands, so it's actually going to be 6 cheaper. So that's kind of interesting. But when it enters the battlefield, the artifacts and creatures target opponent controls don't untap during that player's next untap step, and then you can return 3 snow lands to their owner's hands that you control. Sorry. And return it to your hand. So essentially, you can, kind of put it down as an 8/8, tap everything down of your opponents, you get a free swing. The next turn, their stuff doesn't untap, you get to swing again, this time with an 8/8. And then maybe, you keep the 8/8 out, maybe it's going to die, or maybe you need to tap everything down. You can return the lands back to your hand, which, by the way, is going to increase the cost of this by 6. Maybe not necessarily, but what it's going to do is it's going to make it so you can't tap those lands for mana, and they're not on the battlefield to reduce its cost. So that's a very pricey thing to do, but it feels kind of like a Nezzel Hall from Ixalan, where it kind of has that ability. You might use it, but this one just isn't exciting to me. It doesn't have any persistent ability, so the return ability of the lands is really a late game thing, and I just don't see that happening too often. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the fact that this could maybe quickly come down might save it, but I just really don't see it. The only way I could see this being really useful is if your deck is like I'm going to ramp incredibly quickly with landfall triggers. And this thing is a bonus where, you're running snow lands and, you want to be able to return lands back to your hand because we don't have a lot of ways to do that in standard. So outside of that, I really don't see this seeing too much play, but I'm fine with that. Cards can be niche. This is, I think, the only place that'll be played is in a either limited deck or a kind of landfall deck, and that is completely fine. Next, we have Orvar, the All-Form. It's a 4-cost blue legendary creature shapeshifter 3/3 with Changeling, so it's all the creature types. And it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. Whenever a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. So this is a really interesting effect. Let's first ignore the bottom ability. Whenever you target something of yours with a spell, copy it. So if you're targeting it with a copy spell, you're getting 2 copies. It's kind of crazy. And honestly, this is something I've noticed. The shapeshifters, because of shapeshifterness, have brought a lot more copy spells. I can name, I think, at least 5 or 6 spells, probably 6 with this one, that just let you copy things. And that's something that I'm excited about. I enjoy that just for the fun kind of aspect of it. It is something that's a little bit worrisome, but I think that this is a really interesting and unique design where it's kind of encouraging instants and sorceries, but you also need like permanents that you want to copy. I would be kind of excited to see if you could do something with double vision, which is a spell that lets you copy the first spell you cast each turn, and then maybe you're copying things, you're targeting things with instant and sorcery spells, which then makes more copies. Very interesting in my opinion. And then the other ability is kind of there, I believe, just to kind of counter discard dump. For instance, by the way, that second ability says target permanent, not target permanent you control. So essentially, the first ability can only copy things that you control, but the second one can copy your opponent's stuff. So if your opponent is playing a super controlling deck, let's say they drop down a Liliana, make you discard a card. You can discard this card, and then in response, kind of copy something of theirs. It means you get a little bit of value out of it. So that's very much there for protection. You're not building the deck around it in any way, but I think the first ability is quite interesting. Next, we have Rune of Mortality. It's another one of the runes. By the way, the blue rune was spoiled a little bit ago and it gave flying. This one is the same thing as the white rune. Draw a card, enchanted creature has death touch, or enchanted artifact gives death touch. Except, obviously, it's with death touch, not lifelink. So when I talk about the last rune, we're going to talk about, I'm not really going to break down it again, other than talking about what keyword it gives. Next, we have Vengeful Reaper. This is a 4-cost black 2/3 Angel Cleric. It has Flying, Death Touch, and Haste, and Foretell. Honestly, this doesn't seem awful because of the Foretell here. Turn 2, you play it face down. Turn 3, you play it. Turn 3, 2/3 with Flying, Death Touch, and Haste. Especially in a deck that maybe cares about the life gain trigger. It is not bad. It'll pretty easily halt combat. I'm not saying it's my favorite card, but I could definitely see, especially in something like Brawl where you have a limited card pool, this being a pretty good card in like a cleric kind of deck, or maybe an angel kind of deck as well. Especially because angels on turn 3 is a little bit hard to do, although they're making that a little bit, actually a lot of bit easier with Kaldheim. Next, we have Great Hall of Starkheim. It is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap to add black. Then you can pay white, white, black, tap, and sacrifice it and a creature you control. The other ones in this have not required that other creature. And it says create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. Activate this, only sorcery speed. So this is my first one of these that I actively dislike. So in the past, every single one of these has provided you with some sort of card advantage, either card advantage or card parity. And what I mean by that is it would sacrifice itself and maybe it'd go tutor for an enchantment. Or maybe you'd sacrifice itself and it would make an opponent discard a card. Or it would sacrifice itself and it would make a token copy of something you control. And what's essentially happening there is you are going 1-for-1 with your cards. You are losing a card, but you're gaining either a card or making your opponent lose a card. And some of the spells even actually gave you 2. So it actually gave you a card advantage. And the additional advantage was that you could use it as a land for a little bit and then eventually go to sacrifice it. So I thought they were great and really powerful and really fun. But this one, you're actually 2-for-1ing yourself. Not only are you sacrificing this land, you are sacrificing a creature you control. So unless your deck really wants to sacrifice and needs more sacrifice outlets, because if you're in a white-black deck that is just looking for more sacrifice outlets, of course run this. But it's just not one of those cards where I can say I would throw it into every black-white deck. Where, like, some of the other colors, I could definitely say I would reasonably put that in every Izzet deck or every Azorius deck. And so I definitely think this one is one of the weaker ones of this cycle. Next, we have Rune of Speed. So it's the same thing as the other one, except this gives +1/+0. So it's giving a stat boost and haste. So it's interesting that it's giving it haste. The reason it's giving it a stat boost is that otherwise this is kind of useless. First off, I would hate to ever put this on a creature because you're paying for the creature and then paying 2. It doesn't feel amazing, and then after that turn, it just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything. Yes, putting it on an equipment, maybe an equipment that's really cheap to equip, can be very powerful as you can move it around and give things haste, but that is requiring 2 cards to meet, and I would say that's something that could be done in Commander, but, 100-card singleton. So I really don't think the Rune of Speed is a really good rune, in my opinion, but it definitely is an option, and maybe the fact that you can give any equipment, give things haste, is really powerful, and maybe I'm, undervaluing it, but I just don't see it necessarily being that great. Next, we have Rune of Might. So it's the same thing, except it's +1/+1 and has trample. This is one of the ones where I'm like, okay, trample, I might pay 2 mana to give something trample, but they also gave it +1/+1. So I think this is one of the better rune cards, especially saying that this now makes it very easy to give trample to like a death toucher. And trample death touch is a very deadly combo. On top of that, you're also getting to draw a card. So yeah, definitely think this is a better one than the red one, at least in my opinion. And then we have this card, which is King Narcis's Betrayal. It's a 3-cost blue and black enchantment saga. Step 1, each player mills 4 cards, then you may exile 1 creature or planeswalker card from each graveyard. Does not have to be one of the cards that was milled. And then 2 and 3 are the same. I couldn't do that formatting right, so I just put it twice. And it says, until end of turn, you may cast spells among the card exiled with King Narcis's Betrayal and spend mana or mana of any color. So you're going to mill both players 4. You're probably going to pick the best thing in your opponent's graveyard, best creature, and best creature in your graveyard, and then you get to cast both of them over the next 2 turns, which is really nice. So if you're picking expensive things, you can do it 1 the next turn and then 1 the turn after that. I think this could easily be played in a rogue deck where you're trying to mill your opponent out a little bit with like getting them to 8. This gets you halfway there, and then you also get the value of stealing their stuff. So I think a rogue's deck could actually really benefit from this. I don't know if it necessarily fits, but if you can fit it into your mana curve, I don't think it's a bad choice. So that is it for the standard spoilers, but we actually have 2 card spoilers from the Commander decks, which I believe there are generally 2 to 3 brand new cards with each Commander deck, at least for these pre-con ones. And so let's break down the 2 cards. We have Wolverine Riders. It's a 6-cost green creature elf warrior 4/4, so a 4/4 for 6. But at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 elf warrior creature token. Boy, am I glad this isn't going into historic, but yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, 6 cost, 4/4, 1/1, and then whenever an elf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. So at each upkeep, you're gaining a life and creating a 1/1. For 6 mana, you're also getting a 4/4. If you're running an elf deck in something like Commander, this does not seem like a bad inclusion. It is a little expensive, but it is in green, so that definitely helps alleviate some of that. And then we have Inspired Sphinx, which is a 7-cost blue creature Sphinx mythic. So it's a 5/5 for 7. with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, draw cards equal to the number of opponents you have. So if you're in a 1v1, this is drawing you a whole 1 card. If you're in a 1v1v1v1, you're drawing 3 cards. And then you pay 4 and create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Now, call me crazy, but I think the green card is better, and this one cost more and is considered a mythic. Now, this one isn't useless, obviously. If you can find a way to flicker this is pretty good, drawing 3 cards. And of course, being able to just pay 4 mana at any time to create a 1/1 is not bad either. I just don't see this one necessarily being able to be played as easily because it does cost 7 and it's not in green. So yeah, I'm not as big of a fan. I would rather run the other card than this one. But then again, maybe there are some interesting things you can do with flickering it or with the 1/1 Thopters. So I'm not saying this is a useless card in any way. I just don't think it's as good as the previous one. But that's just my opinion. So yeah, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button. If you also want to see me in other videos, you can hit the subscribe button. If you want to see me on other platforms, check out my links down below. I have a Discord now. I have a Twitter, all of that. You guys should go check it out. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.